Hey, I'm Russell Leeds.
I'm Elliot Spencer.
And welcome to the Property Investors Podcast. On this week's show, we're going to be discussing how you should be investing in property in 2025, particularly with Labour's budget that's just come in, and what are the loopholes and how you can get around some of those changes. So, yeah, it's quite exciting. Are you looking forward to 2025? Think it'll be a good year?
I think 2025 is going to be an amazing year.
What are you planning to invest in 2025?
What am I investing in 2025? So once I've pulled my money out my latest one, I want to do a commercial to residential. I've always wanted to do one. I am going to do one next year.
Yeah, brilliant. So what did you think, before we sort of get stuck into why we're going to be investing in, what we're going to be investing in, if that makes sense, let's have a talk a little bit about the budget. What did you make overall of the...
I was very relieved, actually, to be fair. I think after reading the news and reading the paper, and they made a massive thing about it, and I thought it was going to be scary. I thought it was going to be horrendous. I thought it was going to be horrible. But it actually wasn't that bad.
It wasn't too bad. I was concerned. Corporation tax concerned me.
Yes.
Because obviously I've got lots of businesses.
Yes.
Not so much obviously it affects every business, right? Obviously your property businesses and everything. But it's not so much any individual business. It was just like it's just because it affects everything, altogether. So that worried me. That obviously stayed at 25%, which was good. And the capital gains tax was another one. I wasn't too concerned about capital gains tax.
Okay.
I know a lot of landlords were, but I actually was talking about it beforehand. And as it happens, they didn't actually raise it for a residential property anyway.
No.
They only raised it for everything else to put it in line with resi property. But I think that only really affects you if you're planning on selling.
Exactly.
So if you're flipping properties, buying them as an asset, selling them off, then yes, capital gains tax is a big issue. But with property, because you can wait for it to go up in value, you can just refinance it, and then keep the asset. So, I mean, listen, I'm not saying I've never sold property. There are situations where we've needed to get the money out, but it's not something that I was particularly worried about. But they didn't change it anyway, so that was fine. The big one that I think is going to sting a lot of people, a lot of buy-to-let investors, and let's face it, buy-to-let's struggling anyway, right?
Yeah.
Buy-to-let, with the interest rates, I know that they're kind of stabilised. Have you got a new mortgage recently?
I took out a mortgage in September 2023. Was my latest one.
So not for a while then?
12 months ago.
Are you refinance? Are you getting a new mortgage on this one?
Yes.
Where are you in the process of that right now?
So we've got a decision in principle. We've got it all sorted.
You just haven't taken it out yet?
I just haven't taken it out yet.
What rates are you sort of getting at the moment?
4.3.
That's pretty good. I've got a property this property actually is coming to an end in March. So they were saying to me, like, what do you want to do? Do you want to get a new product? And I'm kind of thinking at the moment, I haven't decided yet, but I'm thinking that I might allow it just to go onto the variable rate.
Okay.
And then see what happens, because I think they are going to come down. They're not coming down, considering that base rates drop, they're not coming down quite as fast as I was sort of hoped they might do, but I do think over the next few years they will come down. So I think I'm just going to allow that to go onto a variable rate. I'm not in a rush to remortgage anything at the moment. I think they are on the way down. I don't want to tie myself in to any.
I was advised to take out a 2-year fixed mortgage, not a 5-year, because it was when the mortgage rates were at scary levels, just after the whole lockdown malarkey. So I took out a 2-year, thinking that in 2 years it'll come down a bit, but it hasn't actually come down that much. I think I'm going to be saving like 0.5%.
Was 2-year at the time that you did it more expensive than 5? Because it was where I took out one.
Yeah, it was more expensive to take out a 2-year mortgage than it was a 5, but I was hoping that the interest rates would come down
by the end of the two,
and I'd save money in the long run, but I haven't.
But surely they've come down a bit now.
They've come down a bit. They have come down a bit. Yeah.
So when does that one come to an end?
That one comes to an end this year. No, next year.
Next year. And are you thinking you're going to go for another 2? Do what I'm doing, let it go on the variable and then see what happens? I suppose it depends on what the variable is.
The thing is, I want to pull some money out.
So you do want to refinance?
So I do want to refinance, because I want to put that money into my next one, my commercial to residential that I want to do.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so interest rates are really high. So with buy-to-let investing right now, it's quite difficult to to make money on it because the mortgage rates like we're experiencing ourselves are actually often more
than what the rent
is worth, right? Which makes it really difficult. Now, I don't think that will be the case forever. I do think it will fall back in line. And for me, it's not an issue. And for you, it's not an issue because we don't rent our properties out. In fact, I don't have any properties anymore I do actually. But I don't have many properties anymore. Only one, in fact, that I'm renting out as a buy-to-let.
Okay, fair.
Everything else is service accommodation.
Fair, so is mine in Shropshire.
In which case, you can make so much more money. It kind of doesn't matter. Interestingly, I was looking at the books for one of our service accommodation properties, and despite the mortgage has gone up, and we're paying, I think it went up from about £800 to £1,250 overnight, which is like 450 quid a month. That's massive. If that was a buy-to-let,
you'd be screwed, wouldn't you?
You'd be screwed, all your profits gone. We've actually managed to keep our expenses. I've managed to cut expenses in other ways. I managed to find a slightly cheaper cleaner.
Fair.
I've managed to, little things like that.
Living companies.
I ended up, I've made about
increased
the same
nightly
amount of
rates.
money.
Yeah. Well, the cost of living's going up, isn't it? So surely with that, the cost of hotels are going up.
Yeah.
So you just put your nightly price up, don't you? And the great thing is with the service accommodation is you can change it like that. If you want to put a tenancy up, you've got to give them notice. And there's a lot of faff with it. But with service accommodation, you just put your nightly rates up straight away.
I'd got a little bit complacent with the original cleaner because they'd creeped their prices up a few times.
Okay.
And I was like, I'm aware I'm overpaying for this now.
Okay, fair.
But they are doing a good job. And it's like, can I be bothered to...
Sometimes it's the better the devil you know, isn't it?
It is. But this kind of forced my hand.
Okay, fair.
With the mortgage changes.
So you changed your cleaner?
So I changed the cleaner. Ooh. But now I'm saving the money that I was...
Are they as good though?
So... they are.
Was it worth it?
They are as good. I need to manage them a little bit more.
Okay, fair.
They do as good a job. I don't feel with the other cleaner. I literally might go with 3 months without speaking to them.
Okay, yeah.
With this cleaner, I feel like I have to just make sure they know what they're doing.
Okay, fair.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah,
tiny bit of extra management, but overall it's pretty good. But yeah, anyway, my point was buy-to-let mortgages right now are struggling. Now, Labour have absolutely made that way more difficult because not only now not making any money on your rent, but they've increased stamp duty massively. So I've got the figures up here in front of me. So for example, basically it's gone up by 3% to 5%, basically 2% across the board, right? So if you're buying a £300,000 property, what's 2% of 300? £6,000. You're going to pay £6,000 more in stamp duty than you would have previously. So I think it would have been on that property 11.5. It's now 17.5, which is a massive rise. A massive rise in stamp duty. So if you're buying properties as a landlord to rent out, actually not your first home, it's a second home or an investment property, suddenly you've got a stamp duty, which is kind of gonna kill it, really. It's now you're not making money on your rent, you're having to cough up all this tax before you even get started.
You ain't gonna see a return for a good few years, are you?
Well, I read a stat the other day that I think 30% of buy-to-let landlords are just selling up now.
Wow.
They're just giving up. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't invest well in property.
No.
It just means
you've got to find the loophole.
You've got to find the loophole. So, stamp duty being the big problem. And you mentioned that you want to do commercial or residential. And can I guess why that is?
Yeah.
Is it because commercial property is taxed, stamp duty-wise, at a much lower rate than residential property?
Absolutely.
Ding, 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 we have a winner. So let's have a little look at commercial property rates. So if you buy a commercial property between 0, which would be a pretty good buy, and 150 grand.
Yep.
How much stamp duty do you pay, commercial stamp duty rates?
Nothing.
0. So you could buy 150 grand property, 0 stamp duty. How about the next 100 grand? So from 150 to 250 is
2%.
2%. So if you buy a £200,000 property, the first 150 is 0, and then you just pay 2% on the 50 grand, which is £1,000 in stamp duty.
Exactly.
Right. And then the remaining amount, so anything above 250 is taxed at 5%, which is not
It's not terrible. No, it's not terrible.
But that's the max. If we look at the max for residential properties, the max is 17%. There's portfolios above 1.5 million. Granted, it's quite an expensive property, but you're paying 17%, which is crazy. Whereas the max is 5%. So if you bought that same £300,000 property, or I think the example I've actually got here is a £275,000 property, but a £275,000 property, it would be $4,500.
It's almost like after lockdown, all the companies that haven't gone back to work, it's almost like the government are saying, "Can you stop buying houses? Can you buy all these abandoned offices?" All these shops, and can you convert them back to houses?
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because I do think that the government tend to put their tax incentives to control what we do, right? So they know that we're not stupid. They know that we're gonna find these loopholes, and they're like, okay, if we want them to convert all these commercial properties, how can we get property investors to buy commercial properties and convert them into residential? I've got a good idea.
Let's make tax.
Well, before we even do that, let's make the planning process easier.
Yeah.
Right?
Forgot about that.
If you've got a commercial property and you want to convert it into residential, you don't need to get planning permission. You can do it under permitted development rights. So Class MA means you can convert an E unit, which is a commercial property, into C3 residential property without needing planning permission. All you've got to do is get prior approval. So it's almost like having outline planning permission already in place. Now, there are some stipulations. You can't change the outside of the building. Over a certain size. It's big, though. It's like, if you were turning it into flats, for example, you could still turn something into 10 flats without needing planning. We're talking massive scale units you couldn't do, but the vast majority you can do. The other thing that's interesting as well, and you mentioned that obviously we do have a surplus of commercial property, because how many people do you know now who are working from home?
Oh, everyone. My mum's working from home. My dad's working from home. My mum works for the NHS and she's working from home.
What does she do?
So, everybody that goes into the NHS, you get like a card. You get like a little card, and the card goes into your computer, and that gets you onto the spine. So it gets you into the NHS's database.
Right.
So my mum's job is to go around everyone that applies for these smart cards, and just to make sure that they are who they say they are. We obviously don't want anyone getting onto the NHS spine that shouldn't be. So she just goes around going all around all the clinicians, the doctors, the pharmacists, just doing little interviews with them, just making sure that they are who they are. Now, she used to do that in person, and she controls the West Midlands, Herefordshire, Shropshire and Cheshire. So she used to spend a lot of time obviously on the road. Now it's all done over Zoom.
So did she used to work in an office and on the road? And now she does everything from home and on Zoom?
Everything from home, yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. And obviously our business, we had a large office in Fitzrovia in London. Obviously you were there.
Yeah.
We had all the team there.
Wolverhampton.
We had one in Essington. But the reason I was thinking London was that was our last one, right? So we had the office in London. COVID came. Yeah. We were like, oh no, we're going to have to learn how to use Zoom. We're going to have to learn how to do everything from home. And then 6 months later, we're going, we were spending 20 grand a month for that office in London. We're still functioning as a business. There's been no issues. We're a year in now. Everyone seemed happy working from home. Maybe we could just carry on and save that 20 grand a month. So how much were you spending on trains?
A lot. At least 100 quid a day.
100 quid a day?
No, it was 100 quid for the pass. It was probably about 50 quid. It's probably about 250 quid a week,
250 quid a week. I was spending...
That was for me and Leah. Don't forget, that's for me and Leah.
Okay.
When she was his PA.
I was spending about 25 quid a day, and I live 20 minutes away on the train. Yeah.
We were spending about 250 quid a week for two of us.
Yeah, that saving, right? So got all this saving that you're making, working for the staff, for the employers. Everyone's saving money. So it's like, well, maybe we don't. Well, of course, how are commercial properties valued? Well, commercial properties are valued by the rents. Now, if loads of people are leaving, what's happened to the rents? Well, it's supply and demand, so the rents go down. The rents goes down, then the value of the property goes down. So you've got more empty properties, they're all losing value. Someone like you comes along,
gets an absolute bargain.
I don't need planning permission. I can buy it for cheap because it's dropped massively in value. I can convert to residential. I save a load of money on stamp duty. It just makes sense, doesn't it?
It does make sense.
I kind of think the government have forced people's hands to
absolutely.
go into things like commercial to residential, like you mentioned, or just general BRRs.
Yeah.
So as well as commercial property, which kind of makes sense, it also counts as commercial property if it's property that isn't suitable to be lived in. So for example, right, if it's got severe structural damage and it's deemed uninhabitable, you can pay commercial stamp duty rates. If it's got a lack of basic amenities, so if it's got like no plumbing or no electricity or hasn't got a kitchen, for example, it's not suitable to be lived in, you can pay commercial stamp duty rates. So if you're looking for a property with real big problem, it's been condemned, it's got fire or flood damage, it's not compliant with building regulations, really crappy property, and it's like, well, that property is not suitable to be lived in, can I look at paying commercial stamp duty rates on that, right? So not only are you getting a great BRR type deal, but also you're paying less stamp duty. Now, a lot of people will be scared of buying crappy properties, right? But you buy crappy properties.
Crappier the better.
Crappier the better.
Crappier the better.
Tell me about a crappy property that you've bought and why it's good that it's crappy.
Okay, so it's good it's crappy because there's less competition. So because there's less competition, you can command a better price, so you can negotiate, right? If there's no demand, a residential house at the minute, every time a residential house goes on the market, you compete with other people, or you certainly were during lockdown when they brought in all those tax advantages. The property market went crazy. Not so much now, but it went crazy, and that was when we bought this one. So yeah, it was. I think there was 7 layers of wallpaper on each wall. There was a green avocado bathroom suite in the bathroom that hadn't been touched in years. The kitchen was falling apart. The plaster was all falling off the ceiling. The roof was coming down. It was horrendous. It was absolutely horrendous. But we got it really cheap. Really, really cheap.
And I think the reason, if you go through the figures, like how much did you pay for that property?
178.
178. And if it had been in good condition, like the other properties on the street, how much would it have been worth?
250.
250. So all the properties are selling for 250, 250, 250, 250. This one's at 178. Why? Because it sucks, right? So this one's at 178. How much money did you spend doing it up?
Just under 30. We'll go with 30.
So now you're 218.
Yeah.
But you've got a property that's worth 250.
Yeah.
You refinance. You don't sell it.
No.
Because then you're going to get whacked your capital gains.
Yeah.
So you refinance it. You left a bit of money in that deal.
I've left a little bit of money in.
Do you know what the problem was? Your property wasn't crappy enough.
It probably wasn't crappy enough, to be fair.
You were saying stuff like 7 layers of wallpaper. We need to be talking of stuff like, it's been condemned. This property is a significant health hazard.
Okay, yeah, there was no health. There was a bit of asbestos, but there wasn't anything health hazardry. But it is an interesting one, I've got a question for you. If I'd have said, let's say I was going to buy that as my second home and I was going to be lumped with this stamp duty tax. If I'd have said to the owner, look, I'm going to be, doing it up, can you take the kitchen out for me? Is that a possible thing?
No.
No, it's not.
I mean, I have heard of things like that going on.
Okay.
But no, I wouldn't recommend talking about it publicly.
Oh really? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. We'll redo that.
No, it's fine. But
I just had a magic thought. I had a light bulb moment go off in my head. Then I was thinking, I wonder if my next one I could just tell them just to pull the kitchen out, as I'm going to be pulling it out anyway.
Although, if you're going to be in interesting conversations with the landowner, have you heard about the Tony Blair buying his property to save stamp duty?
Briefly, yeah, the one he bought for 8.8 million.
So basically, Tony Blair, he wants to buy himself a house.
Yes.
He's Tony Blair. He's not going to buy a little house. He's going to buy a nice house. So he wanted to buy a house in Marylebone in London.
Right.
And as you said, it was for 8.8 million. Now, here's the thing. We looked at our stamp duty tax earlier on, right? You're paying above right now, above 1.5 million, 17%, which is a lot. It was 15%, which is still a lot, right?
It is.
So you were going to pay an absolute fortune in stamp duty. So he said to the owner of the property, he's like, well, look, you own the property through a company, right? So, and they said, yeah. He said, well, rather than me buying the property, can I buy the company from you instead? Now, when you buy the company, you still pay stamp duty, but it's a different type of stamp duty. And I think it's about 0.5% that you pay.
Wow.
Right. So rather than being 15% above the 1.5,
Yeah.
whatever it was, and he saved, I mean, the stamp duty has gone up since this happened, right? So it would be even more of a saving now, but he saved £312,000.
Wow. That's another house for some people, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
That is a house for some people. That's
I mean, for Tony
crazy.
Blair, it's probably landscaping the garden, right? But yeah, for a lot of people, it's another house.
That's a lot of money.
It's certainly a deposit for a very, very nice house, isn't it? You know, it was more than the average house. So, you know, we think, the rich people, it's not like they don't know about these loopholes.
No, of course not.
Right. So Tony Blair, Labour leader, he knows about the loopholes. They use the loopholes. You should use the loopholes as well. So that's another one, actually. If you can buy the company, it's always worth asking the question.
Absolutely.
When you're finding out how they own it. If they own it, if you find out it's owning the company, it's like, does that company own anything else? Because a lot of people, we call it an SPV, which is a special purpose vehicle. A lot of people will set up a company specifically to buy that individual property. Right. So we've done it with Willingham House. We've set up a company to buy Willingham House, which we're going to run as a hotel. Now, you could buy Willingham House off us direct, you pay commercial levels of stamp duty, but might it be more prudent to buy the company and pay 0.5% on everything? Of course it would.
Absolutely.
The only things you've got to take into account if you are buying the company, you want to make sure they've got like no massive debts that you're buying alongside it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you've now got a CCJ. Did I not tell you that?
Imagine we ain't paid the mortgage for the last 6 years.
Yeah, exactly, right. So you are opening yourself up. So you want to make sure you got a good solicitor that's looking through it all, making sure that you're protected.
I've got a question for you, just a quick one for the viewers watching this. If you buy a property, you put your deposit down and then you take out a mortgage, right? When you buy a company, how does that work? So
you'd need to, the financing is a little bit different. So you'd need to speak to your broker and work it out. And it might be not as attractive, but if you're saving hundreds of thousands of pounds, you've got to weigh it up, right? But you speak to your broker and work that out exactly how you'd finance it. But still, can be very, very attractive. I was actually chatting to one of our friends. They live around here. They're not property investors, and they were saying they bought a property around here. Now, around here, average house price, what? About 3 million? I think their property's about 3 million. And they got offered this. The person said, look, I own this in a company. If you want to buy the company, you can buy the house if you want to. You want to buy the company. And they were like, oh, no, that sounds dodgy. I didn't do it. I was like, no. I said, even Tony Blair. Tony Blair does this. You just saved a fortune.
That's probably why I thought it was dodgy.
Well, it probably is.
Tony Blair's doing it.
Tony Blair's doing it. Yeah, exactly. So I think the big thing for me from 2025 and from the budget is buy-to-let is a struggle right now.
Absolutely.
Stamp duty is a nightmare. It's ridiculously expensive. I can't believe as well, I talked about this on the budget video. If you want a full breakdown of the budget, check out the video we did about a month ago. But stamp duty came in, I mentioned this to you earlier, during the war.
Yeah.
Right, so there was a war going on. This was about 350 years ago. There was a war, and the king at the time, that's how long ago it was, the king said, look, to pay for the war, I'm going to have to introduce this temporary tax to help us get through this. And we're going to stamp duty when you buy land or property, you're going to pay stamp duty, but it won't be around for very long. 350 years later, it's still going strong and getting raised all the time, which I think is ridiculous. But so if it was me and I'm looking for 2025, I'm thinking I want to be looking at commercial conversions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is what you mentioned, looking for commercial property that I can convert into residential property, which I think is a fantastic strategy. I'm also looking for really crappy properties.
With no kitchens in.
With no kitchens or fire damage or whatever. And while it might be scary, the more problems there are, the more things you can solve.
Absolutely.
Right? And if you can buy it really cheap, pay no stamp duty, renovate it, get it, you can make so much money from BRRs. The amount of our students that we see all the time. It's not like, Elliot's done this once ever. It's like, we're doing this. Hundreds of our students are doing this all the time, where they're going out, buying properties, putting their money in, renovating it, pulling all their money back out and doing it again and again and again. And I think in 2025, that's the strategy. Combine that with renting it out as service accommodation or renting it out as a HMO or to a social housing provider. and not relying on the traditional buy-to-let model. And I think that is the key to success as a property investor in 2025. And we're going to finish in a second, but before we do, Elliot's going to share some pearls of wisdom.
Oh, wow.
To end the show. So, Elliot, based on everything we've just said, what are your pearls of wisdom to finish the show off? What I want them to go, the podcast was good. But the pearls of wisdom from Elliot at the end, that was what sealed the deal. So, Elliot, take it away.
I hate it when you do this to me. Do you know what? I wouldn't be where I was today. Genuinely mean this. I wouldn't be where I am today with property if I hadn't have gone to the crash course. So my pearl of wisdom for the day is, if you haven't gone to the crash course and met me and Samuel and Russell and the team, then get down there. It's £1. It might change your life. Go to the crash course.
So he used his pearls of wisdom for a cheap plug. Unbelievable. I mean, it's good advice. I would love to see you guys come to the crash course.
It's great advice.
But I can't believe you used your pearls of wisdom segment for a cheap plug for the crash course.
All right. Property pearls of wisdom, whatever it is you call it.
I'm going to leave a link below for the crash course, though. Make sure you do book on.
Real property pearls of wisdom.
It's £1. While you're thinking, it's £1, full day of training. It's unbelievable. We'll be there. Elliot will be there. Don't let that put you off, but come on down. It's amazing.
I've got it.
Go on.
In 2025, do not do buy-to-let. You will make no money. Bang. Boom.
Why do I even bother? And on that bombshell, I think it's time to end. Guys, thanks very much for watching the Property Investors Podcast. I'm Russell Leeds.
I'm Elliot Spencer.
And we'll see you next week.